One in five suffer.
Erase the stigma.
Brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Yes.
I'm Marla.
And I'm Dave. We want to let you know right off the top, or as my son would say, off rip, that today's show is brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave, specifically our social media sites. Marla, what are our social media sites? What are our handles and how can people find them?
Here is where you can find us.
Yes.
H
YMCA?
M with Marla and A&D Dave.
Now, we have great things in store for you. We're trying to build up and we're focusing on our social media sites. So we want to let you know right off the bat, or again, off rip, as DJ would say. Marla, what does the 200th subscriber to the Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave YouTube page receive?
We have gifts for the 200th follower, whoever that is. Whenever you hit it, we'll know you're 200. And you'll be contacted and you'll be given a nice gift. Mm-hmm. The 500th follower, and then the milestone, the 1,000th follower
the 1,000th follower gets a big gift.
Will receive something very special and tangible, and something that everyone can enjoy. It doesn't matter your religion, your gender, your height, your hair, your brows. You're still going to get the gift.
I would suggest you sign up as soon as possible, because I can guarantee by tomorrow you will have missed out on the gift. So today, we thought it would be a good idea to let you ask us questions about mental health. Usually, we prepare a show for you, and it's our sincere hope that in the life stories, testimonies, and expertise of our guest, you'll find a ray of hope. But today, it's your turn to ask us explicitly the questions on your mind, whether it be about mental health, whether it be about as it relates to our family, how we deal with that. We want to hear from you. We'll be right back.
Help someone who is struggling by supporting the National Alliance on Mental Illness and be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
Okay, as Dave said that we're back. Now, I want you guys to do me a favor. I want you to imagine that Dave and I are completely unclad. We're going to be completely, vulnerably naked, virtually, but not really. Because I really think that in order for you, nobody starts a fight naked, right? Because you're completely defenseless, you're vulnerable. And so we want to sit here with the idea that we are going to be that vulnerable to all of you. That's it.
Well, at least that means we're not going to be fighting, so that's a good thing. We're going to start the questions right off because we probably have more questions than we can get to.
Time.
So we're going to try to rush through them. And thank you guys already for submitting the questions. We appreciate that. Those of you who submitted questions on Instagram. Again, Marla, what's the Instagram handle? MHM with Marla and Dave.
MHM with Marla and A&D
yes,
Dave.
MHM for Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
So the first cheerleader.
I thought you were Olympic Dave.
I did not like cheerleaders. I was the athlete.
The first question is, Marla, here's a question for us. How do you handle doing the right thing, but also having people criticize you for appearing like you don't care? That sounds like they're asking about something specific. Because they're saying appearing that we don't care. That can't seem to be how we appear. But hey, we're going to be naked.
I think that here in my naked admission, I think that it does appear that I personally don't care, and I think that until I'm overwhelmed, and then everybody's like, "Oh my goodness, she cares so much she can't stop crying," because I think that in order for me to do that, it takes an ability to compartmentalize for me. And I had to learn, it's a skill, truthfully, that I learned early in our marriage when I was a typical mom, lady, mother, housewife, really. And the kids were driving me crazy. And Dave one day said, "Look, who's going to be in charge? Is it going to be you or the adult, or are you going to get to the 2-year-old?" And I'm like, huh. And what it really said to me was, it was time for me to pay closer attention to my emotion and put my emotional self aside and deal with what logically needs to be dealt with for an end result. And that just grew for me into the understanding that real love is not just giving in to what somebody tells you that they want, but it's really satisfying what's needed, and what's needed is not always popular.
Well, I was, since you had before the show, you were on your pre-show social media get-together that you usually do, so I assumed that they were asking something specifically about something that we were dealing with as of right now. I'll put it to you like this: as far as I'm concerned, I can speak for myself. I try to appear according to what is necessary. And I have to also sometimes edit how I appear. And the reason why I say that is because we have children that are dealing with issues, and sometimes those issues can be more sensitive or not sensitive enough to the situation at hand. When that happens, I feel like I have to be careful about the energy in our environment. So there are some things that I have to pick and choose and I don't want to call them battles, but things that I address with Monique specifically. And there are times that I pick and choose things that I addressed with DJ specifically, based on what is the outcome. If someone is in an episode, I don't want to just hit them with how I feel and how bad you made me feel, and then all of a sudden it seems like it's my issue that's dealing with when someone else is the one episodic. In those situations, I pick and choose, and sometimes it can appear that I don't care. But I definitely care about everything that involves at least the mental health of my family, the mental health of those that are affected by my family. A lot of times we try to protect the mental health of those that deal with our older children because it's not easy. And take it from us, it's not easy. We are obligated to do it. That's something that God put on our plate. And we try to let everyone else know He did not necessarily put it on your plate.
You can stop eating.
Yes, it's our meal to digest. A lot of times we would suggest, hey, you know what, before you go in, get your eyes open. Anyway, hope that answers the question. I'm not sure.
Let me finish with this about the criticism. I have had to learn. I call myself now bulletproof. I will repeat here what I've written on social media for the general understanding. If you have never been in me and you didn't come out of me and you can't save me, I just can't give you the energy that makes you understand that you can't matter that much. In other words, I can't even feel the criticism of someone who doesn't have any real information.
And I guess to wrap it up, what both of us are saying is it's not that we don't care, but we have so much that we deal with. There's certain things that we have to just sometimes say we're not going to deal with.
We prioritize our care
today. Absolutely.
All right, number 2, what do you hope for your kids? Wow, I can jump quickly and succinctly on this. What I hope for my kids is what I hope first for myself, and that is healing, independent healing and wellness, because that's where peace lies. And I have a personal conflict of, some total of issues in my past. When we do a part 2 to this, I'll share something very interesting that I've discovered even in the last couple of days. But for me, again, succinctly, what I hope for my children is what I hope for myself. And that is that each one can understand where they are, who they are, take accountability, and work on their personal healing so the whole pie can have a chance to be correct and have a chance to be whole instead of just one broken slice.
Pretty much the same for me. We hope the same for all of our kids. Peace, really. A peaceful existence, a stress-free existence. And when I say stress-free, no one has an existence or a life that doesn't have stress come into it. But what we would hope for is that you learn to have a good facility to deal with those stressors in life. And so we have another question, a lot more questions to get to. We
have a lot more questions.
We are
We're
getting
probably
to
not going to get to them all today.
We definitely won't get to them all.
But we'll do a part 2. A Q&A, look for a Q&A part 2 in your future.
There you go. We got a lot more questions to get to. We'll be right back.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
It's a common misconception that people who suffer from mental illness are violent and unpredictable. Here are the facts.
According to mentalhealth.gov, most people with mental illness problems are no more likely to be violent than anyone else. In fact, most people with mental illness are not violent, and only 3 to 5% of violent acts can be attributed to individuals living with a serious mental illness.
People with severe mental illnesses are actually over 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crime than the general population. You probably know someone in a mental health that's dealing with the mental health problem, and you don't even realize it, because many people with mental health issues are highly active and productive members of our societies and communities.
Maybe it's about time to reconsider how we think about mental illness and the people who suffer with it. This message has been brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
David is a thinker.
I never do anything without thinking about it first.
Marla is a feeler.
I basically wear my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's like a match dancing with a firecracker.
All right, we are back. So I have the question. I have another question for us already pulled up, Marla.
Before you do that, I just want to remind everybody on MHM with Marla and Dave on YouTube and MHM with Marla and Dave on Instagram and Loving Beyond Reason Facebook. I'm there. And so if there's a live question that comes through and we get a minute, I'll be happy to hop on it. So just know that I'm in the room with you, and welcome.
All right. The next question is, how do you keep a good marriage with mentally ill children? Marla?
That's a really terrible question to ask me today, because if I really had to do something today, I would just walk out the door and shut it and go to a little small studio apartment with a Murphy bed in the wall so no one could come in, and I would just stay there. You know what? I think that my level of saturation is a little bit different, and I think I burn really, I don't know. It's like I'll put it to you this way. I like analogies. My nature is to be a sprinter. That's my design. So a sprinter goes all out, and then they recover, and they go all out again, and then they recover. Where I believe that Dave's nature is more of he's like a marathon hiker, not even a marathon runner. He's like a marathon hiker. He just can continue to traverse and travel, and he has more of a steady speed, which for me, it's hard. It's hard to maintain it, and I think it's hard for me to maintain it. Harder, to be totally honest, because just in the differences of who we are, and yet I'm the one that's usually here to balance all of it, whether I want to stop sprinting or not. So I'm on like a lifetime sprint. So how we deal with it, how do we keep a good marriage? By just accepting that sometimes it's just a crappy day, and I'm not going to try to make it something that is not.
Well, dealing with the day as it comes is a philosophy that a lot of people take for granted. I will speak for myself. For me, what Marla calls marathon hiker, not sure what that means.
You're a trailblazer.
But as from her definition, what I would tell you is it goes back to how I answered the question before we went to the break, and that is what I wanted for my kids is to have a peaceful existence. And so what I have found, in order to get there, you have to recognize that you have stress. Everybody has stress. Everybody deals with times when you're going to be overwhelmed. The reality is how do you deal with that without bringing each one of those stresses back to every time you get a new stress, so that you have to deal with them as they come. And what I found for me, that's where my spirituality comes in, and I take God and I fight. We have arguments.
You argue with God?
Left and right. Based on how I think it should go, how it shouldn't be going, how I think things should be, holding him to his promises for me, that type of thing. And what I find is that just like, I was raised, and as the Bible says, take everything to God in prayer. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not unto your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him. He will direct your path. Somebody on today. What I found is that by doing that on a consistent basis, first thing in the morning, there are times when I get up in the morning and I feel like the days I'm dealing with some remnants of that I didn't fully deal with on the day before, that I go and I take my private time with God in the morning, and I can leave my knees and feel like, okay, this is going to work. Immediately something happens and I lose it. And then by the time I deal with it, I end up laughing, because it's like, wow, well, that didn't work too well. And what I found is that when I ask God for something, he usually says, okay, you got it. But then the problem comes back, and then I have to act like I have it or I don't. Either I have the power to deal with this that he's given me, or I don't. And so what I find is that as I move forward, the power is there. It's just that I have to keep myself from falling into, with God's grace, falling into selfishness and thinking about myself over someone else in any one of these issues, especially when you're dealing with children with mental health issues, and they've become adults and they're still dealing with it. Before I tend to get angry, I always tend to stop and say, if it's this bad for me, the person who
we're
feels,
talking about our marriage, though.
And trust me when I say, the person who feels like he has it all together, then how bad is it for them? I try to do the same thing for my wife as well. And I try to talk things through. A lot of times, depending on the day that it is that we're dealing with, it's not time to talk it through, that I think I can do a lot better. But that's how I do. I take it to God first, and then I try to take it to those that I deal with in the family.
And I'll leave this, when Pukaki hits the fan, I will say that for me, I remind myself of the respect that I have for him as a person and as a friend. That's it. I'm going to jump to another question. And this is really, again, some of these are hard hitting for today. When you're a person that is determined to always be strong, how do you know when you're not? Okay. Part 1. And how do you know when you have taken on too much? Part 2. And what are the signs for you of being overwhelmed? So I'll say when you're a person, which is my issue, that's determined to always be strong, how do you know that when you're not okay? I know I'm not okay. For me, I don't know that I know that. I just, when I can't go on, and only recently have I gotten to the point of I'm so overwhelmed that today is a day I just can't get up. Like I work from a space, and I just, and it's not a lasting thing. I recognize where I am, but I just recognize that even with all my prayers and pleading, I'm out of power, which is something for me that has always been a sign. My energy wanes.
Well, I don't have that question on my list, so I'm not sure how to answer that, but we're out of time for this segment. So when we come back, Marla's going to repeat that question to me, and I'll try to take it, because it seemed like a 3-part question. So it was a little bit too much for me to memorize, but I promise you I will get back to that question as soon as we come back. Don't move. All right, the poll question means that music, I should say, means that it's time for the poll question. Marla, what was the poll question that we asked Scott Killaby last week?
By the way, I'm sick of Scott and his 100%.
Yeah,
He gets every answer.
Scott's on top of it.
What? Anyway, last week we asked what percentage. I should have had Scott take on my test in high school. Last week we asked what percentage of mental health disorders show first signs before a young person turns 14 years old?
Your options were 25%, 50%, or 75%. Now, a lot of times when I'm doing these questions, I put the answers sometimes at the beginning, sometimes in the middle, sometimes at the end. It doesn't seem to fool Scott. He guessed it as usual, and the answer is, Marla,
50,
ding, 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 50% of mental health disorders show first signs before a person turns 14 years old. That means you see signs when they're very young.
What percentage of homeless adults, question for this week, staying in shelters live with a serious mental illness? I'll repeat. What percentage of homeless adults staying in shelters live with serious mental illness? 17%, 26%, or 34%?
That was 17, 26, or 34%. So go back on. We told you about those social media handles, MHM with Marla and Dave on Instagram. That's where you'll find the poll question for this week. Answer it. We need to hear feedback from you. We love it. Keeps us going.
And you need to share your voice. We want to hear from you.
And how do you share your voice on that?
You vote.
Boom. All right, so we said that, Marla, you were going to remind me of the question, and I can take it in parts.
Okay, and there's two more parts, and I'm gonna. One kind of is remnant of another, so I'll finish. Hold on. So when you're a person that's determined to be strong, how do you know when you're not? Okay. How do you know when you've taken on too much? Yeah.
So wait, is that two parts? Or
yeah,
is that,
and the
so
third
what's the
part
first
is
part?
the
What was
first
the
part
first
is
one?
what I just said. When you're a person that is determined to always be strong, how do you know when you're not okay?
All right, so here's the first thing. I think, first of all, it's very presumptuous to think that you're going to always be able to be strong. Everyone's human, and so there will be times when you will be overwhelmed. So to think that you won't have times where you're overwhelmed is a little presumptuous, and I think that is when you decide that that's not going to happen, you are almost guaranteeing that you will definitely be overwhelmed and not be able to handle it as if you're a person who thinks that you should not be overwhelmed and you should always be strong. So I, first of all, don't think that I'm going to always have all the answers and always be strong. So that's...
How do you know when you've taken on too much?
For me, I get a sense of foreboding that basically says, okay, I literally know I have way too much to do.
But I said yes.
Not enough time and not enough energy, and I've put myself in a corner and I'm about to get in trouble. Those are the times when if I handle it correctly, I'll start calling people up and apologizing and saying I've kind of taken on too much. I'm not going to be able to get to helping you with this or whatever it's going to go. Whatever that's going to fall out, it's going to fall out. It's going to be what it's going to be. And when it comes to the family, again, that's when the overwhelming things that seem impossible, that's God's department. That's where he and I really have it out. And to date, he's never failed me yet. So he's shooting 100 for 100.
And finally, what are the signs that you're overwhelmed? And for me, like Dave said, it's just I don't want to even. I'm a very social person, and when I get to the point where I don't even want to interact with anyone, not even which is rare, that I'm just like, I don't want to answer the phone. That's when I know that I have been pushed or been triggered for a reset.
Well, as an introvert, I'll be honest with you. For me, that third part of the question, how do I know? It's usually when I feel almost an overwhelming anger, and for me, my best friend in life is my wife. It's Marla. And so whenever I feel like I'm so angry that I don't even want to hang out with my wife or anything like that, and I just need to get away even from her, that is when I know I'm overwhelmed. I've had to ask God to help me because I didn't think I was going to heaven, because God, from my understanding, was you got to love God more than anybody. I was like, well, Marla is first today, so I'm not sure if I'm going to make it.
I can't say that.
But so that being the case, whenever I feel like that's not the case, I know I'm in trouble.
I'm just a mere woman. Just regular people.
All right. Did I answer the question?
You did. I knew I was overwhelmed when I gave birth. So therefore, here we go.
All right. Well, we're trying to be helpful. So next question is, are you and Dave against holistic? And apparently they were asking this of you. So are you and Dave, Marla, against holistic approaches to treating your son's mental health issues?
I'm not against holistic approaches. But what I can say is, a matter of fact, I would prefer it. But I'm pro what works. And that's the bottom line. I would love to start there, but when you're not getting the desired response, I don't think it's like the La Leche League for women who are nursing. You know, it's amazing if that works out for you, but you don't starve your baby because you're not going to be able to be a productive nurser, right? You give it a bottle. So for me, it's not maybe the God design. It may not be the ideal thing, but we have to do what works at the end of the day to achieve the goal. So that's how I feel about holistic.
I think we're the same on that, so we can move on to the next question.
Marla, I have often heard you scorn Moniece for what seems to be her negative behavior. Do you think that it's fair to blame her bad behavior when you know that mental health issues are the cause?
Well, they asked you.
Here's how I see that. I think at a certain point in everyone's life, you have to become accountable for who you are and what you've been given. Every adult must do that. So I feel like I can love her, but I'm the main one that cannot applaud a behavior that is harmful or destructive to others with the excuse that mental health is what's driving it. So I feel a compassion for the mental health issue of a Jeffrey Dahmer, but I feel equally that consequences should be paid for the fact that he killed and ate people. That's just the bottom line. And so unless you are so disabled that you can't recognize, and I'll give you this as a real example. Moniece will often say, I have a reckless mouth. Well, if you can recognize that enough to say that, but you can continue to make that the excuse that you let your mouth harm other people, then I got a problem with that. It's a responsibility to say, I have a reckless mouth. This is hurting other people. Maybe let me take some steps to manage this issue. If you can acknowledge it, then the choice to manage it is also a thing that is on the table.
For me, this question is a loaded one, and it's very difficult, and it's something that we wrestle with on a regular basis. And the reason why I say that is because one of the things that Marla said about in answering the last question is that her goal and our goal is to be effective. And there are times when in our humanity, we can't take it. So when Moniece has certain behaviors that we can't take, and also now that Moniece is a mother of our lovely grandson, there's certain things that we just can't let go. And so there are those times when we have to speak up in those instances. There are other times when, there are pressures from the outside to saying, why don't you guys jump in and fix this situation? I also have to weigh how I feel at the moment. Is it time for me to fix it at the moment?
We can't fix it.
And when I jump in, if I'm not going to be able to, will I actually damage the relationship with our own daughter to the extent of that there's no other help that she can even receive from us, period. So that sounds crazy, and that sounds like something that doesn't make any sense, but that's how we have to deal with it.
I have to address this going out. That's probably the difference between me and you. You have to jump in your statement, know when to fix it. It's not something we can fix.
Exactly.
Period.
But even sometimes when we address it, it becomes problematic.
Well, when to deal with the issue is another story.
Well,
but
that's
fixing
semantically what I meant.
Is off the table. She's
right.
She's
an
grown.
Adult. We can't fix it.
We'll be
that's
back.
True.
Bad.
Worthless.
Don't trust them. They'll hurt you. You're worthless.
It's pointless.
When the pain of schizophrenia meets hope, everything can change. Help someone who is struggling by supporting the National Alliance on Mental Illness and be a part of the NAMI effect. Hope starts with you.
It's raw, real, and unfiltered.
It goes by so quick. And, we have about 8 to 10 more questions that
We
we're not
knew
going to
we
be
weren't
able
gonna
to
get
get
to
to.
it.
But, one of the ones that I would love to come back and deal with is, why do you seem to speak more openly about your son's mental health condition than your daughter's?
Well, we can do with that right quick before we
Go
go
ahead.
out.
You end.
I would say one of the things that we on here on Mental Health Mondays, and Marla and I dealing with Loving Beyond Reason, and even with our professionals over at NAMI, one of the things that we always say is that we don't want to put someone in a position that they're not willing to deal with. So it's not our position to actually
Call
speak
you out
openly and call somebody out
on a diagnosis.
We're never trying to front somebody on their diagnosis. Our son right now is perfectly willing to deal with his issues in the open, and we don't always see eye to eye, but he has given us permission to do so. With Moniece, we rarely discuss her diagnosis that we know is an actual diagnosis, because she has not been willing to accept that for herself from time to time. So instead of the same responsibility that we take for others, we take for our children as well. So what we are there to do is make sure that we are there for our family, but we're not there to out our family. Even though it seems like from time to time some of our family members are trying to out us. And
that's okay.
And we laugh at that because our love is pure. So that's the main thing.
And I'm going to say this, and this is my final message to all the parents that are listening to this, and I know there will be many, many, many. When and Dave is the one who really opened me up to it, really received this. When you know what you've been to your children in love, when I know that, there's no amount of false accusation or criticism that can even penetrate me, because even if you didn't receive it, I know what we gave, and I know that it was as pure as it could possibly be, and it's never perfect. So what I'm saying to parents is, you got to be careful to not take on the guilt, and we'll have a whole show about that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the one thing I want to leave with parents. You can't convince someone to accept the gift of love. You've given it, you gave it, and it has to sit well with your soul.
And that is pretty much our final word for today. And the reason why I say it that way is we always go out with something that has some hope. The main thing is when you do the best that you can, when you do all that you can, and you know that you've loved with all your heart, just stand up in that love, and there's nothing else that you can give. And
nothing to prove.
As God is the creator of love itself, He's going to do the rest for you. I promise you, if your love is pure and sincere. So do your best. Love your family. As you love your family, it gives you a better understanding of how to love the community, and we can make the world a better place. I promise you on that.
And why we're here because our whole goal is to assure you that you are not alone.
Next week, we have Kirk Whalum, one of the greatest saxophonists of all time, in the Guinness World Book of Records, by the way.
For the longest saxophone solo. You told me that, and I was like, what?
Yeah, Grammy Award winning. He's got all kind of awards. He's the best thing I can say about him is he's a great person, and he's my brother. Love him. He's a good friend. We'll see him next week. You'll see him next week when you log back in and check out the show. We can't wait to share it with you. Marla?
Thanks for your questions. We hope we were able to bring some hope in answering, and keep it coming.
And we'll get back to the rest of the questions when we can.
Bye.
See ya.